For years, Johnny Depp has captivated the world with his magnetic performances, transforming every character he touches into something unforgettable. From Captain Jack Sparrow to Edward Scissorhands, his roles have become cultural landmarks, symbols of cinematic brilliance. But beneath the layers of costumes and eccentricities lies a man whose life has been subjected to relentless public scrutiny, betrayal, and a media firestorm that nearly destroyed everything he worked for. This is the story the world forgot to tell, and it's time the world apologizes. Johnny Depp didn't simply arrive in Hollywood, he conquered it. With his breakout roles in the late 80s and early 90s, it was clear he wasn't your average heartthrob. While the industry tried to mold him into a conventional leading man, Depp deliberately swerved away, choosing instead the weird, the wounded, the complex. He gave voice to characters most actors wouldn't dare touch. His partnership with director Tim Burton became the stuff of legend, birthing gothic fairy tales that were both melancholic and mesmerizing. Johnny was a rare breed, a rebel with a soul, a movie star with the heart of an artist. But the very traits that made Depp so beloved also made him a target. He didn't play the Hollywood game. He was fiercely private, deeply loyal, and painfully human. His authenticity didn't always translate well in a world hungry for scandal and simplicity. And when he fell in love with actress Amber Heard, the world watched with both curiosity and skepticism. Their romance at first appeared like a fairy tale, glamorous, passionate, and spontaneous. But it quickly unraveled into something far darker. In 2016, the world was rocked by Heard's allegations of domestic abuse. Headlines screamed with accusations. Photos were splashed across tabloids. The words wife-beater were brandished carelessly, and overnight Johnny Depp, once a celebrated icon, was painted as a villain. Hollywood, terrified of backlash, began to distance itself from him. He was dropped from major franchises including Pirates of the Caribbean, a role that he himself had redefined. Studios, brands, and collaborators scrambled to protect their reputations, leaving Depp isolated, disgraced, and betrayed. But something about the narrative didn't sit right with many of his supporters. Fans around the globe rallied behind him, demanding a fair hearing, insisting that the man they had admired for decades deserved better. As legal proceedings began to unfold, a different picture started to emerge, one that contradicted the headlines and exposed cracks in Heard's story. Audio recordings leaked, where Heard admitted to hitting Depp. Witness testimonies surfaced. Evidence once suppressed came to light. In 2020, Johnny Depp took the bold step of suing a British tabloid for defamation. The trial was brutal. Though he ultimately lost the UK case, the proceedings shed light on the complexity of their relationship. It wasn't the black and white narrative the media had initially embraced. It was a story of mutual volatility, emotional chaos, and psychological warfare. But the damage to Depp's career had already been done. He was forced to step down from his role in Fantastic Beasts. Studios continued to turn their backs, and even as cracks in the accusations widened, the world seemed unwilling to reevaluate its rush to judgment. Then came the Virginia trial in 2022. This time, Depp sued Amber Heard directly for defamation, over an op-ed she wrote in the Washington Post, where she identified herself as a survivor of domestic abuse, widely understood to refer to Depp, though his name wasn't mentioned. The trial, streamed live, became a media sensation. Millions watched every testimony, every cross-examination, every tear-in revelation. And what the world saw was a man deeply hurt, not just by the allegations, but by the world's willingness to believe the worst without question. Johnny Depp took the stand and recounted his side of the story in painstaking detail. He didn't portray himself as perfect. He admitted to substance abuse, to struggles, to flaws. But he consistently denied the allegations of abuse. The jury and the world began to see the picture anew. Heard's credibility took hits as inconsistencies were exposed. Her performances were scrutinized, her motivations questioned. And when the verdict finally arrived, it was a stunning reversal. The jury ruled overwhelmingly in favor of Depp, awarding him millions in damages and affirming that he had been defamed. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was an emotional reckoning. Depp, after years of humiliation, was finally heard, vindicated, seen, But even that victory couldn't undo the damage completely. Years of lost work, broken relationships, and emotional devastation had left their mark. And perhaps most painfully, it was all avoidable. The media's rush to judgment, the industry's cowardice, and society's failure to demand truth before condemnation. They all played a role in destroying a man's reputation without due process. What Johnny Depp endured is emblematic of a larger issue: how society treats accusations in the court of public opinion. While it's essential to believe survivors and give them space to be heard, it's equally essential to uphold fairness, to investigate thoroughly, and to remember that lives are at stake on both sides. Depp was labeled, vilified, and abandoned, not because the evidence was clear, but because the narrative was convenient. In the aftermath, Depp has slowly begun to rebuild. He returned to the stage with his band Hollywood Vampires. He stepped back into film, most notably appearing at the Cannes Film Festival to standing ovations. He is focused on art, music, and reflection, but the shadow of the scandal still lingers. The apology he deserves has been whispered by fans but rarely spoken aloud by those who condemned him the loudest. Where were the retractions, the corrections, the accountability? The world owes Johnny Depp an apology, not just for believing lies, but for being complicit in a system that thrives on destruction, for allowing gossip to masquerade as truth, for forgetting that even celebrities are human beings with dignity, emotions, and limits. Depp's story isn't just about one man. It's about how quickly society can turn, how unforgiving the spotlight can be, and how necessary it is to reserve judgment until the full story is known. Johnny Depp's resilience. Throughout it all is a testament to his strength. Lesser men would have crumbled. But he endured, even as the world watched him fall. He didn't retaliate with anger. He didn't seek revenge. He simply told the truth, waited for justice, and trusted that the world might one day remember who he really is. This isn't just a comeback story, it's a warning, a reminder, a demand for change. The next time allegations emerge, the world must do better. The next time a person is accused, we must pause, listen to all sides, and resist the seductive pull of outrage. Because what happened to Johnny Depp should never happen to anyone again. And so, the apology must begin. Not just with words, but with actions. Studios must reevaluate how quickly they sever ties. Media outlets must reflect on their sensationalism. Audiences must remember their responsibility. And above all, we must recognize that justice is not found in headlines, but in truth. Johnny Depp gave the world decades of art, passion, and imagination. The least the world can give him in return is fairness. And finally, an apology that's long overdue. But this apology must be more than symbolic. It must reflect a fundamental shift in the way the entertainment industry and the wider public handle controversy, especially when it involves complex human relationships. When Johnny Depp was first accused, it wasn't just his career that was under fire, it was his humanity. He was reduced to a caricature, judged not by the facts, but by the fury of a digital mob. Corporations, PR teams, and studios moved swiftly, not because they were certain of his guilt, but because they feared the backlash of standing by someone under fire. The presumption of innocence was tossed aside in favor of optics, and in doing so, a precedent was set. Guilt was not something proven. It was something declared by trending hashtags and inflammatory headlines. This must change. Studios have an obligation not only to protect their brand, but also to uphold integrity and fairness. They must resist the urge to make reactionary decisions without full knowledge of the situation. Johnny Depp was a face synonymous with box office success for years. His name alone filled seats in theaters around the globe. Yet, when controversy emerged, those same studios that profited off his talent were among the first to cut ties, acting as though loyalty and history held no weight. The cold calculation of corporate survival came at the cost of one man's dignity. That cannot be the standard going forward. The media, too, must reckon with its role in this tragedy. Far too often, news outlets prioritize speed over accuracy, engagement over ethics. In the race to break stories, the nuances of truth are flattened into headlines designed to provoke outrage. In Depp's case, the media became both judge and jury. Selective reporting, omission of context, and the deliberate framing of narratives created a tidal wave of condemnation that few could withstand. Articles based on unverified claims were shared millions of times. Every image, every quote, every moment was dissected under the most unforgiving lens. Rarely did media outlets circle back to correct themselves or offer equal attention to Depp's side of the story. It took a courtroom and a globally televised trial for many to finally reconsider what they had so readily accepted. Yet perhaps the most difficult truth lies with the audience itself, the everyday consumer who shares a story, who comments on a post, who chooses what to believe. Public opinion is powerful. It can lift someone to stardom, or it can destroy them in an instant. The rise of social media has given everyone a voice, but with that power comes responsibility. In Johnny Depp's case, many rushed to judgment without evidence, parroting accusations and spreading misinformation. The lines between truth and rumor blurred. It became fashionable to mock him, to turn his pain into memes, to dismiss his side as irrelevant. When the full truth began to surface, only a fraction of those who condemned him were willing to say, "We were wrong." And therein lies the deeper wound, one not easily healed by court victories or public vindication. The apology owed to Johnny Depp is not just for the false accusations. It is for the way the world discarded him without hesitation. It is for the opportunities he lost, the roles he was denied, the humiliation he endured, and the emotional toll it exacted. It is for the pain of watching his life's work tainted by lies and for the betrayal he felt from an industry he gave everything to. For over 3 decades, Depp delivered unforgettable performances, brought joy to millions, and helped shape modern cinema. He was not just an actor, he was a symbol of artistic courage and creative freedom. Yet when he needed support, when he needed belief, almost no one stood with him. True accountability begins when those who participated in his fall take responsibility for their actions. Publications that printed defamatory stories should publicly retract them and acknowledge their failure. Executives who severed partnerships without due process should reflect on the long-term consequences of their decisions. Influencers and celebrities who joined the chorus of condemnation should admit their mistake and use their platforms to advocate for fairness. Because if we do not learn from what happened to Johnny Depp, we are doomed to repeat it with someone else. The machinery that nearly destroyed him is still very much intact, ready to grind down the next target at the first sign of scandal. There is also a broader lesson here about the fragility of public trust and the importance of empathy. In our rush to defend victims, we must not forget that false accusations do exist and that every individual deserves to be heard fully. Supporting victims and ensuring due process are not mutually exclusive. Both can coexist, and both must be respected. Johnny Depp's ordeal has taught the world that being silent in the face of injustice, even when it is unpopular to speak out, is a moral failing. The next time someone is accused, the question must not be, how do we cancel them? But what is the truth? And how do we find it together? Johnny Depp has shown extraordinary grace throughout this ordeal. He never lashed out at his accusers with vitriol. He did not demand vengeance. He sought only to clear his name, to reclaim his identity, and to find peace. He did so not through angry diatribes, but through legal means, through evidence, through patience. His strength lies not only in his talent, but in his character. He endured public vilification with a quiet dignity that few could have maintained under such pressure. And while the damage to his career may take years to undo, he has already begun the most important restoration, his reputation and his sense of self. The apology the world owes him must be felt, not just said. It must ripple outward, changing the way stories are reported, the way decisions are made, and the way we treat those in the spotlight. It must serve as a cautionary tale for the future, a solemn vow that we will do better. And for Johnny Depp, it must be the beginning of a new chapter, one not defined by scandal, but by redemption, respect, and renewed admiration for the man who never stopped believing in the truth, even when the world refused to hear it.